Thank you all for joining us. The Columbian Editorial Board is pleased to welcome candidates for Clark County Sheriff, and glad you could all make it. My name is Greg Jane. I'm the editorial page editor. I'll let the editorial board members introduce themselves. We'll start with Scott.
Scott Campbell's my name. I'm the former publisher of the Columbian and have been on the staff for about 40 years.
And then the people in the news conference room.
Ben Campbell, publisher of the Columbian.
I'm Craig Brown. I'm the editor of the Columbian.
Hi, I'm Colleen Keller. I'm the assistant news editor of the Columbian and a member of the editorial board.
Then Jody.
Jody Campbell, editorial board member.
Right, and then we do have a reporter sitting in. She will not be asking questions in this forum, but may want to speak with you later. And as mentioned before, we are recording this. We will post it unedited online for the benefit of our readers and for the community. And with that out of the way, now to the important part, the candidates. Please take 1 to 2 minutes to introduce yourselves and explain briefly why you are running. Then we'll get into specific policy questions. And we'll start with John.
All right. Good day, everyone. Thank you for having us. And I don't see the other candidates, but good day to them as well. My name is John Horch, and I am running for sheriff. I've been almost a lifelong Clark County resident, grew up here, raised my family here, started at the sheriff's office when I was 15 years old as an explorer, and then I became a reserve officer with the sheriff's office. Hired on full-time in 1989. I worked at almost every single job you can think of at the sheriff's office: detective, warrants officer. I was a bomb technician. I became a sergeant. I was in charge of different squads. Worked in the internal affairs unit. I became a commander over several different precincts and over the drug task force. And currently my current role is the chief criminal deputy at the Clark County Sheriff's Office, where I oversee all the enforcement personnel, all the uniformed detectives, SWAT team, major crimes, child justice center, all of that. So I decided to run for sheriff a few years ago. Some people approached me outside of law enforcement, inside of law enforcement, community members, and said, we think that, have you considered running for sheriff? We don't know if Chuck Atkins is going to run again, but if he doesn't, we think you'd be a good candidate. So I asked them questions of why, and they thought my leadership skills and my passion and love for caring for the community. And so I gave it good consideration. I thought about it and did a lot of research. And in the middle of everything that was going on about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, with all kind of the turmoil in law enforcement that was taking place around the country, I decided, the sheriff's race is open to anybody. And I didn't want to leave my family, the sheriff's office family, or Clark County with just anybody to run for sheriff. And I knew I had the experience, and I knew I had the backing of a lot of people. And that's why I decided to run for sheriff. This is a very big job, and it requires somebody who can step in right away on day one. My education supports me running for sheriff, organizational leadership. I've been to the National FBI National Academy back in Quantico, Virginia. And so all of these things have kind of prepared me to lead the way. We have a lot of issues going on right now in law enforcement and in Clark County. As we know, we're going to discuss some of them. And it's going to take somebody with some courage and some leadership to handle these things. And that's why I'm running for sheriff. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll go to David next.
Well, hi there, David Shook here. I have been in law enforcement for a little at 30 years. For the last 17 of those years, I have been in leadership roles at various agencies. I first started in law enforcement in the United States Army as a military police officer. After my years in the service, I decided that I wanted to continue my career in law enforcement, and I started as a volunteer reserve police officer over in the city of Hillsborough. At that time, my dad was in law enforcement. My family has about 100 years in public safety services around our communities, and I wanted to continue. So I applied at the Washington County Sheriff's Office. In 1993, I got hired there, and through the next 25 years, I rose through the ranks, and I really had the opportunity to do any and everything that you could do as a police officer. I'd already been on the SWAT team, so instead of doing that, I was on the crisis negotiations team, where I learned many skills about communicating with people in crisis. And so as I continued on in my roles as a leader, I'd actually started out fairly early. It's, about halfway through my career, I started overseeing big events like county fairs and national golf tournaments where you'd have anywhere up to 70 or 80,000 people show up in a week's period of time. So incident command was one of the very first things I had learned. But through my time there, I also was a police trainer, mentor, coach. I had at the end, I was running the entire field training work group for the entire sheriff's office with hundreds of coaches, and we were hiring. I was involved in the hiring process, the training of employees, and then sometimes the firing of those employees that didn't fit the standards. So I really had the experience of many aspects, and not just alone in how the hiring and the disciplinary processes work, but how you trained and mentored employees to become effective public safety servants. Over that time, I had the opportunity to learn how to manage budgets. $38 million budget in our patrol division where I worked. Everybody else wanted to go and have fun in operations, and I wanted to learn how to buy widgets and equipment and make sure we had the right equipment for employees. And through that time, I also had the chance to oversee 150 employees in the patrol division. We had several lieutenants, but my job was 9 different sergeants and contract cities. And so I had the opportunity to not only interact internally with county government, but also city governments within the county, learning how to communicate wants and needs of those cities, and then also figure out how they were going to pay for it and providing those processes. I worked at state levels. I was involved in the field training through the states and helping to elevate the training standards for state police officers in Oregon. I also was an instructor down there, so I would spend hundreds of hours down at the state academy learning to do that. So through the years, I had attended command colleges in the state of Oregon for the sheriffs. I had attended other FBI and other leadership courses in diversity, equity, and inclusion, or other classes in how to lead in the 21st century. It was really important to me because I'm a people person, right? And so my focus is generally in what's called a servant leadership group, where I focus on employees' developments because that's super important for their careers and one of the issues here at the Clark County Sheriff's Office. So those rounded opportunities for me really gave me the opportunity to learn. And as I retired in 2018, I went out and I actually was selling body-worn camera programs. That was the last project I did for Washington County, where I researched and developed and then helped to implement a program over there. And I ended up retiring and traveling around the country about 200,000 miles. But I missed this. I missed public safety service, dealing with the community. I spent 20 to 25 days a month out with the community talking. And so I got back into it. I got hired in 2020 here at the Clark County Sheriff's Office. They don't generally hire in middle management and above positions here unless you're a chief or sheriff. And so as I started my career here at Clark County, it didn't take me long to recognize that a lot of the leadership methods and a lot of the modeling that they were doing for our community were just old and antiquated. And it was time for a new vision. The leadership team here has been around for 30 years. And it's time for a new vision because, as we know in our public right now, public safety services are having issues. And I have a different vision because I've worked for multiple agencies. I've had the opportunity to learn different skills and have different leaders teach me how to be an effective leader. So that's a little bit about myself. I'm sure we're going to have more conversations about those things. And so my name's David Shaw.
Okay, thank you. And Ray. Can't hear you there.
Something else. How's that?
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Most excellent. Hello, everybody. It's good to see you. It's good to see all the people there. How you doing, John? David? It's good to see you. Again, my name is Ray Reynolds. I've been a part of this community for going on about 35 years. Some of you know that I grew up in another area, but the primary time that I spent up here has been in Clark County here in my lovely Clark County here in Washington State. Just to give a little bit about me, I went to I lived down in Florida, where I enjoyed a little time down there, going to school. Also went up to the University of Wisconsin, where I got my degree. I'm a biologist by training and a water research scientist by training. I have a degree in water resource management. I have a degree in biology, and I also almost have a minor in chemistry. So I'm a biologist by training and a scientist by choice. I've been married about 31 years, almost 30 years now. I've been married to my wife, Kath. I've got 7 wonderful children. I've got 5 boys. 4 of them have been in the military. 2 are still in. My Joshua is in the military, and he is going to be a major real soon here. He's in the Air Force. My son, Josiah, he was in the Marine, and he became a staff sergeant, and he's done his time there. My other son, Jonathan, was in the Army, and now my number 4 son, Jeremiah, is in the Marines. He's finishing up his AIT, and he's headed right now to infant artillery training at Fort Sill. Very excited about this. Very exciting time in the Reynolds family. We are really looking forward to a number of things that are going on right now. I'm very excited about this race. I've been deeply involved with the Vancouver community for a long time. I know most of the faces in this interview. I've been here. We've taken part in a number of different issues involving our veterans. I've set up programs involving our domestic violence, youth mentoring initiatives I've done. I'm setting up targeted enforcement. And as most of you know, we honor our vets and we honor our students. I was a school resource officer for about 15 years, and I really learned to enjoy being around our kids and how to set up programs that actually do something to help our community, programs that actually develop our youth through our mentoring program that we set up, things that actually helping our domestic violence situation, helping our people, setting up programs that actually work. We actually set up a wonderful program for our domestic violence. And even now, today, we have established another program that I set up called the NET. It's a wonderful program. I'll give you a little bit more information about it as we go through. I've deeply been involved with a number of different programs. I've also worked with the NAACP, where we've developed a program where we call it the Rites of Passage. And there I was an instructor there. And these are the programs that are part of our community. These are programs that we actually take part in. We don't just talk about that we're going to set up this thing, we're going to be a part of it. I have set up programs where we actually are involved in the community. And as some of you know, the community has recognized me on numerous occasions, even given me the coveted Bill Morehouse Award, the Community Excellence Award. These are all awards that are coming from the community to me, not because of just being Ray, but because of our service. I believe that is qualified me as not only leadership, but for an understanding of what our community needs. And I believe right now is the time for a change, for us to develop a whole system that answers to the community and is extremely transparent. So I just about run out of time, but I'll finish up with this. I'm the right person at the right time for this position. And it's time that we have someone that understands what the community loves to do and what the community needs. And my name is Ray Reynolds, and I'm going to be your next sheriff.
Great, thank you. And Ray, by the way, you were breaking up a little bit, at least on my screen. So later, if I ask you to repeat something, that's why. So
that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
One of the big issues facing the department is the recruitment and retention of deputies. How do you go about fixing that? And we'll start with David.
Well, thank you. So recruitment and of our staff here is a multifaceted issue, really. Nationally, we're having issues hiring employees in policing and every other really workforce. And so we have to change what the sheriff's office here in Clark County is offering our employees. We are the lowest staffed and the lowest paid employees in the state. But oftentimes the lowest paid isn't the main factor that drives employees out of here. Others like to say these laws push some people out, but many of our employees are going to Vancouver and Battleground and Ridgefield and other places that are still local in our state. And so they're wanting more, they're wanting hope and opportunities in this organization that we currently have. I went on a ride along with the city of Vancouver. I wanted to come to a sheriff's office, and many of these employees that are leaving are wanting more from our sheriff's office. So we've got to focus on several things. We have to have a better pay and compensation package, which means that we pay incentives for things like college and special assignments or special skills that a person may bring, like a second language spoken. We need to also give them opportunities to do more. We're dealing with a new generation of employees. And so for somebody to just come and work for 5, 6, 7 years before they really get opportunities to do other things is not really going to be attractive. Our employees in the jail are working 16-hour shifts. They're working extra hours every day that they're working. There's not many young employees that are going to want to come find a job that starts you off as 16-hour days and working in this non-balanced work-life balance, which is a priority for younger people today. So we have to fix the operational schedule so that it's doable for our workspaces, but it's also doable for the employees that we're trying to attract. Right now, we're doing some online things. I think when we started doing the PST training process, which is a very online training method, it really took away some of that individuality. And so we need to have employees that are assigned to our hiring process to make sure that we're out there. We're not necessarily doing that. I know there's some things in the works to accomplish that. It's not working right now, but we need to be out there. We need to be focused on not just new employees, but laterals. I came over as a lateral from the state of Oregon. I retired at 51. I still had several years in me. I felt like I could work more. We need to go to other states and find those employees that are young or younger and they've already retired for one career. We can focus on the military. We can create our relationships back in the colleges and the high schools. And so that it's a process that brings employees wanting to work for the Clark County Sheriff's Office. This is an honorable location. It's a great place to work. We just need to fix some of those reasons why people want to come here. So that's going to take relationships with the county commissioners or the county council, the county managers. It's going to take relationship building with our communities so that they can recognize how we can bring in. And again, we're competing with the city of Vancouver and other cities that have incentives for them to come. They're taking 3 weeks right now at Vancouver to do backgrounds for laterals. That is unheard of, but we need to be quicker and faster because we're losing some of those good candidates in that efficient process. So we're going to fix that. I have no doubts we're going to, but that's going to allow for more people to be attracted to what we're doing here because it is different policing than any city.
Thank you. Ray, how do you address recruitment and retention?
You know, this is probably one of the most important issues that we can really come around. You know, and right now the situation is dire with our Clark County Sheriff. I have taken the time to not just say what I'm going to do, but to actually talk to the employees. And I've talked to deputies. I've talked to the corrections, and I've talked to support staff. And all are saying the same thing. Number one, we have to, what we at this point, we have some of the most dynamic people working for the sheriff's office that I've ever seen. All my years that I've been here, 30 some odd years of working with the sheriff's office, I have found that some of the best investigators around are from the sheriff's office. Yet we decided to pay them 26% less than Vancouver, which is an outstanding place to work for, I might say. But at the same time, we're not paying our people. Why is that? And right now, as things are happening, within 3 years, if everything stays the same, we could be down almost 46%. That's outrageous. That would put us.
So is that just a budget issue? Is that up to the county council?
yes, right now, it is going to be a budget issue. And I'm glad you brought that up, because what we really need to
Hmm.
We lost you there,
bad.
Ray.
Yes.
We'll come back to you.
we are losing people.
I'm sorry, you were, there was a glitch there. We lost you for a sec. So hold on, let me go to John. What are your thoughts about recruitment and retention?
All right, thank you. Last year, actually, I'm in charge of recruitment and retention at the sheriff's office. I asked for the sheriff about a year and a half ago to take over because I couldn't stand what was happening before the big crisis. And we actually, for the first time, hired a sergeant to be in charge of just recruiting. We revamped our entire process, and Mr. Shook is aware of this. We streamlined the process actually faster than Vancouver Police Department. We got everything going. We had human resources across working together and getting our people through the system. And then we did have, I will disagree with Mr. Shook on this, the law changes in Washington did affect how many law enforcement officers wanted to come to Washington State. We've had more leave the state for other law enforcement jobs than we've had go to laterals to the city of Vancouver. Yes, that is one of the issues. Compensation, I would agree, is another issue. That is true. We are working on that with the county council. We've made proposals. We're in contract negotiations. They are aware of this. We're behind the curve. It's probably a leadership issue on the county council's part and the law enforcement culture. People don't want to go into law enforcement right now because they believe the national media narrative there for a while that law enforcement was bad across the nation. And we're having a hard time recruiting good people. It's not just about numbers. I want to make this very clear. We can talk numbers. You can throw out a compensation package all day long. We need good people. We need qualified people who are educated, who have compassion, who have some life experience, and then we can teach them the skills. You can teach the skills of handguns and driving and all that other stuff, but we need good, solid people, and they are just not applying. And it's not just the sheriff's office, it's across the board. So we have been confronting these things. We are currently working on them, and we are making progress. We will get there. And laterals, I will say that a couple years ago, we had 7 or 8 come from Portland. When Portland was going through stuff, we had 7 or 8. The minute those laws changed, we have not had one applicant from across the river in Oregon come over here. And that was a direct, I've talked to them, directly related to some of the laws that affected what police officers can do in the state. So I think that is a major contributing factor. And I've been working with the legislators to change those. And we did change some last year, and I'll continue to work on those. So that is one of the main factors. Thank you.
And Ray, I don't know if your connection has improved. Did you have anything to add to that?
I do. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, the main thing that we are facing here is a financial issue. We absolutely have to stop the bleeding right now, as I said before. The things that are being done right now are not working. We're only getting more of the same. You heard from John that we're working on this, we're doing that, but yet no one's applying. The first thing we have to do, according to the employees, is that we have to hire people and pay them what they are. I've decided at this point to put together a supplemental budget that will help address the initial getting everybody up at least to the point that they should be at. Of course, we understand there's negotiations to go on and collective bargaining, but at the same time, we can set the parameters. So what I'm intending to do is actually present a budget initially for this year, supplemental to, so that we can get our enforcement, our corrections, and our support paid right now. And that's right now looking at around about 4.6 million that I'll be sending a budget to them. It's critical that we start off right now to stop the bleeding. It is because of pay. It is because of the toxicity of the environment that is in the sheriff's office that we have to change that. And we can change that through leadership. And then, of course, we have to change it through getting our county council to back us up and to pay our people and to be involved in getting good law enforcement. Because that is the purpose of government, to protect our people here in Clark County. Because right now that is not happening. Our people do not feel safe.
Supplemental budget requests, have you run that past any of the county councilors?
I've talked a little bit about it and said that they have not had a supplemental budget come from the sheriff's office. And I have spoken to one, and I do believe that we can submit a supplemental budget. It would be worth it to at least stop what's going on now with the loss of staff. And that's the most important thing. We must stop the loss of staff, and we must stop it right now. We can't keep doing the same thing the old way. The old way is not working and hasn't worked. We're almost at catastrophic levels. We're only responding to 1s and 2 priorities with the sheriff's office. At one point, there was only 1 officer on when I was working. 1. It's unacceptable. We have to have more. We have to stop this bleeding, get the situation where we can pay our people properly. And the people then, once that environment changes and that toxicity goes away, we will start having more and more people applying to our sheriff's office because we've got the staff and we've got the training.
David, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, actually, I don't think a supplemental budget's going to work in our current environment. Our revenues are the way they are. We have a county of 500 and over 500,000 people. The county is responsible for governing all of those people. The law and justice budget is already 75% of the entire revenue or budget that the county has. So to just say I'm going to add more money, I actually look at it a little bit differently. I think there are some areas in our existing 68 million that we could reallocate and look at trying to find efficiency, going back and finding those programs that are no longer effective in providing public safety services to our community. I think it's important that we look at what we have currently so that we can then say to the public and the county councilors, listen, we've gone through and we've cut all the fat off the bone. And from there, you create those strategic plans to add personnel and resources, but you do that full knowing where you're currently at, because I don't believe we know exactly where we're at with this budget. This year, we've planned for 1.9 million in overtime, and they already have a little foot mark that we're probably going to need up to another 2 million. The jail is burning about $250,000 a month in overtime. I haven't heard what the patrol or the enforcement branch is burning, but that's significant monies. So again, just adding on to a supplemental budget at this point, I don't think that's a start from the very beginning in trying to come up with a plan that's going to help with public services and getting more staff to our agency here.
Okay, let me go to John.
All right, a couple things here. I'm not going to try to take up too much time, but we do supplemental budgets all the time, whether it's for body cameras or something else that we think that we need. And they're submitted at certain times of the year. You just don't submit them anytime. And I'm not sure who Mr. Reynolds spoke to, but the council does know we proposed a compensation package back in March. This was discussed at different forums. So it has been discussed of how to get the compensation up there immediately. So someone could just say they're going to put in a supplemental budget, but it doesn't mean anything. The county budget has a budget already. Where you can get is through salary savings right now, because we're down 74 positions and they're saved probably 4 to 5 million already this year. That's different monies that can be discussed as well. So saying you're just going to put a supplemental budget, we put in supplemental budgets all the time for different things and they have to get looked at. And I don't agree with that there's trimming the fat, because we're already the lowest staffed agency in Washington State countywide. So I'm not sure how much more you could trim off of that if you're trying to also add bodies. So those two, the math doesn't add up there. So the sheriff's office budget needs to get looked at with the new county council come January and sit down and map this out, a strategic plan on how we move forward together so we can get the correct amount of deputies out there for their safety and for the public safety.
Okay, thank you.
Wait,
Go ahead, Jody.
follow up, John. You said that recently you were in charge of recruiting.
Last January, I asked the sheriff to take over recruiting. Yes.
Okay, so this year, January, or year before?
Year before, a year and a half.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, and actually the budget discussion is very interesting. We could stay on that for a while, but we need to move along. My next question is, how would you approach the enforcement of laws that you personally disagree with? And we'll start with Ray.
Thank you for that. That's a very good question. You have to approach it like this. Is this law a just law or is it an unjust law?
Who decides that?
Well, Martin Luther King came up with a definition for just, whether it's a law that does not violate the natural law and does not violate the conscience of men. Martin Luther King, I think, had a very good way to identify these unjust versus just laws. How would I handle a law that I believe was unjust? I would be very clear with you that law, if it is unjust, I will not enforce it. Can I give you a quick example? Back years ago, black people were not allowed to, that had to get up on a bus. They had to get up when a white man came by. And if the white man told you to leave that seat, you had to leave it. Well, a very courageous lady by the name of Rosa Parks did not get out of her seat. She said, no, I'm not going to get out of my seat. And she ended up being arrested. I believe all of us will agree that that was a major violation of her civil rights. Her basic constitutional rights were blatantly violated, but that was the law. And
Okay, but for now, regarding state law, who in your department, who would decide what is a just law and an unjust law?
That would be your leadership, and that means your sheriff will be looking at what those laws are that are unjust, that are going to violate people's constitution.
So there are some laws that you would not enforce as sheriff.
There are some laws that I will not enforce as sheriff.
And you will be the sole decider of that.
I will take that and consult. I will consult with others, of course. But the important thing is that there are laws, just like the one with Rosa Parks, that I would not enforce. Thank goodness those laws that we're looking at, like Rosa Parks, where her constitutional laws rights were violated. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think we need to make a very definitive statement here that is those kind of laws that are blatantly violative of people's civil rights. Those cannot and must not be enforced.
Have you seen, Ray, Scott Campbell here? So
hello, Scott.
Have you seen a lot of situations like that? I mean, Rosa Parks that's an important landmark in our country's history that she stood up for it, and it's very very inspirational. But how often do you run into situations on a day in day out basis in Clark County, and the kind of situations what kind of things have happened there?
And Ray, can you also give us an example of one, like one that you've encountered like recently?
And I agree with you, Scott. There are very few examples that we probably won't, because most of the laws that we have, I would consider just laws, of course. Yeah. And I'm very excited about enforcing them, and I believe in solid enforcement. But in some cases, like say for example, a blatant violation of your Second Amendment rights, where a person is been told, where our Constitution is clear that a person has the right to keep and bear arms. And even with the recent decisions of our Supreme Court, which now allows people to carry, those are laws which are very important, and that people, not just laws, but rights that are extremely important to people. If someone decides to make a law, whether it be our legislature or any part of that blatantly violates those constitutional rights, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, our Fourth Amendment rights, or our Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination, we as a people must recognize that those laws, we must look at that and judge those laws based on the supreme law of the land, which is our Constitution.
So will you enforce I-1639?
Absolutely not.
You will not enforce a state law that was voted on by the people and that has been upheld by the courts?
The 1639, especially if you look at when you sign on the bottom of it, where you signed the base saying, this is my application, it blatantly violates your constitutional rights.
Has it been upheld by the courts?
Well, I understand that it has been upheld by the courts. But at the same time, I'm sure a number of laws, just like your Jim Crow laws, those were upheld by courts as well.
So you will be the final decider.
Just because it's upheld by the courts does not still make it an unjust law. And if you remember, our Rosa Parks, they only recently got rid of her charges. She was convicted of those charges. And we must also remember that there are other violations of our constitutional rights. Do we remember the Nisei during World War II, where they were in prison?
But we're talking about now in the state of Washington.
And you asked me, and that's why I'm bringing that up. The 1639, which I'm on record of saying I will not enforce, blatantly violates the constitutional rights of our citizens. And I believe that we as a people, we need to be very clear that we are not going to tolerate a government that blatantly violates our constitutional rights. We can't let that happen.
The courts have ruled that it's constitutional, but you know better than our judicial system. Is that what you're saying?
I didn't say those words at all. What I am saying is that as your sheriff and as the sheriff of Clark County, there are decisions that have to be made about whether we will enforce or not enforce an unconstitutional, in my opinion, law or an unjust law, which I consider 1639.
What other laws will you ignore and not enforce?
I wouldn't use the word ignore because I'm not going to ignore any law. I'm going to look at it, see that it is if it fits within the just versus unjust. But at this point, I can see some of any law that comes up now that will perhaps take away your right to meet in meet. Say if the city council or the state legislature comes up with a law that says that the people cannot meet in church.
Do you think such a law would be upheld by the courts?
If the law said that people could not meet in church, if people said that people could not sing in church, if a law came up that said people cannot gather in church, that would be a blatant violation of your constitutional rights. And would I enforce that law if someone said, well, now we need to go to that church and place the pastor or whoever it is under arrest for opening up that church? Under my administration, it is clear. I would not enforce that law.
If such a law were passed, do you believe the courts would uphold it?
If such a law were passed, I would hope that the courts would not uphold such a blatant violation of our constitutional rights. I would hope that.
But you don't think the courts should be the final decider on that. You think you should be.
I believe that we should allow the process, which we all know in civics, of looking at the executive branch, our legislative branch, and our judicial branch. These are co-equal branches. We must remember that they have what's called checks and balances. Each of those bodies check and balance the other. So when it comes to an unjust law where a law is made and we require the executive branch to carry that out, I'm saying that at that point, the executive branch has to recognize that enforcing those laws, which blatantly violate people's those constitutional rights, like Rosa Parks, like the Nisei, like what happened in Tulsa. All of those laws, those people's rights were violated, but it was the law. And so in our case, we're talking about 1639, where I believe it is blatantly violative of our constitutional rights.
Okay, even though the courts say differently. So,
and I'll take your word for that.
Okay, let's move on. Go ahead.
Should the Clark County Sheriff's Office take an active role in supervising or overseeing Clark County elections?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again, please?
Take a role in overseeing Clark County elections to make sure that they're fair and not fraudulent.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Let's move on. John, how would you handle laws that you might disagree with?
Well, that was a good discussion there. So I've answered this several times in forums, and my answer won't change, is that I am not the sole authority of declaring a law unconstitutional or not. I've said this several times. We do have discretion discernment when we see things come down. That has happened before when we talk with our prosecuting attorney's officers. Once in a while, something might come up that if after conferring with our attorneys that we feel it could be a violation of the Constitution, we figure ways, or we get clarification, or you can write a letter to the Attorney General, and that's been done several times. I'm going to say something about 1639. It was upheld. I think it's at the 9th Circuit right now, but it was upheld once. 1639 is a very large law, and if Mr. Reynolds isn't going to uphold it, that means there wouldn't be any gun sales in Clark County. I don't think people realize that because it requires the background checks that the firearms dealers wouldn't be able to sell guns because they're required to do that. So that's not and that's what we want to happen. I don't think that would happen. So there's many parts to 1639. I don't see how anybody can just say they're blatantly not going to do that. Because you wouldn't have any gun sales taking place in Clark County. The other sheriffs around the state of Washington made those statements to start off with, but they're still selling guns there because they're complying with 1639. The Attorney General all wrote them a letter and told them that they had to comply. So if the Ninth Circuit Court deems it to be unconstitutional and something changes, then so be it. But whether I agree or disagree with the intent, or if something's going to make something better, it should have no influence on whether I enforce or not enforce the law as sheriff.
Okay, thank you, David.
Yeah, so for 8 times now, 9 in the military, I sworn to uphold the U.S., the state constitution, and then, of course, whichever state I've been working in, the laws of that state. As John said, we aren't the final arbiter. In fact, the judicial system is generally the final arbiter. I agree that it's been upheld as being constitutional. And it's important for a sheriff to be able to take that information. For me, I believe that you use your experts. So you use your attorneys, you use the other work groups, and you talk to the Attorney General, who is the lead law enforcement in the state, because that's how you make sure that you're following the Constitution and the laws, and you're not violating people's rights the other way. I think it's really important for a sheriff because we don't just make sure rights are only followed one way, but they're followed the other way too. 1639 and the background checks and some of those things that are happening, I think they're significantly important because we need to keep the guns out of criminals' hands and those that might be having a mental health experience, right? And those shouldn't be forever exceptions, but again, in that process, it's been set up. And in fact, I believe in that law. When I was studying it, it actually puts the responsibility back on the sheriff, some liability should something happen with somebody who you've not done a background check on. So again, I think it's important that as sheriff, you're balancing protecting people's rights, but you're also following the laws and the Constitution of the state and the country.
Okay, thank you. Craig?
Sure. Recently, there's, over the last couple of years, there's been some high-profile incidents involving the sheriff's office, which it seemed came down to a matter of training. One in the jail, at least one out on patrol. What would you, as sheriff, do to change the way officers and corrections deputies are trained? So, and start with David, I guess, please.
Okay. Well, thank you. Literally, for most of my career, I've been involved in training. Setting training standards for a large sheriff's office like Washington County, more than 600 employees. We trained both sides of the house. And again, it's following recognized standards in training for policing, national standards, whether they're from case laws or specific laws, and how, why, and when. And so I think the importance and what I've recognized here at Clark County is that because of staffing, because of funding, for many reasons, training has become a check the box training. For me, there's an importance of setting those standards. So it's not just check the box, but it's making sure employees know how they're doing. Our jail staff, for example, they generally get about 12 hours of training every year with hands-on. So that's firing tasers, that's talking or dealing with inmates, which are the worst of the worst, right? So right now we have rapers, robbers, and murderers. It's a high level of criminals in our jail, and they're getting 12 hours generally of hands-on physical training. That's just not enough for that professional group of individuals. And again, here at this office, because of all those dynamics and the inability to do it. So for me as sheriff, I'm going to be setting some training standards. I'm going to be actually focused and prioritizing more hands-on training for this organization. I've been here over 2 years, and I believe I've only done any sort of hands-on mat training 3 times for a couple hours. That's just not enough. We every month go out to the range and shoot guns, right? And we do that pretty much anybody that wants to do that, as many rounds as you want to shoot. But my point is that you have to train mentally, physically, as well as skill-based. And so those are just some things that need to improve, and it doesn't matter. So at Washington County, they used to train separately like we do here at Clark County. I combined the training so that we could, first of all, save money on instructors. We could train one time or several times together because they do similar jobs. And then also it creates better relationships. Here in this organization, the relationships are strained because they only mainly stay in their own work groups. And so I want to improve that by having us work together, which will allow us to save that money. We do most of our training on overtime. So again, saves money in all different areas. But that's what I'm going to bring this to the organization, is making sure that the training has been raised in the standard and the quality and the amount that all of our employees go through, whether you're in uniform or a civilian.
Thank you. John, I bet you have some insight into this issue.
Well, I would like to say, I'm not quite sure which instance you're talking about, but I won't, because it could be a variety of reasons why something occurs out there. It could be a training issue, or it could be other issues as well. So I'm not sure what particular instance you're talking about, but I will say this about training. Training, when people talk about training, one thing is more training isn't necessarily better training. You have to have the right kind of training. And it boils down to the staffing issue that we have had here for years. Is our training has been limited. And because when you train somebody, it has to be on overtime, because when you send 5 people to training and they come off the road, 5 people have to come in and work overtime and do that training. So it all boils down, and as everybody we've been talking about the last year or two, staffing has been more of an issue. We have 3 sergeants that are assigned to training, which is the most we've ever had. They are all dedicated. We run the best training program we can. We look at case law when it comes out, and we try to apply the training as fast as we can with that. And so training is very, very important, but the right kind. Like if you go to the golf range and practice for 10 hours and your slice doesn't improve, practicing maybe for a half hour with the correct instructor, that's what you're getting improvement. So getting the right kind of training is, we're always striving for that. So I would agree with Mr. Shook. Training is very, very important, but you have to, it all goes back to staffing. We can talk about that right now, but none of that, we can't really improve that too much until we get the staffing to do it, because it'll just, again, requires people to come off the road, which requires overtime, which is exhausting to our employees. Thank you.
Ray, what are your thoughts about training for the sheriff's office, and including both road and corrections deputies?
Yes, exactly. That is, of course, one of the most important things. Once we develop a training issue, let me say this. Many of the laws that have came through that have been written and that we are now having to deal with, I call some of these laws the dirty dozen that came out. These laws have required training. 940 required training. Again, of course, we're right. We're not having the staffing that we need. And again, that has to do with what we spoke to earlier about not paying our staff what they're worth and what they need to be paid. At this point, the environment is such that our staff do not believe that they are cared for by management, and they don't believe that it's worth working for the Clark County Sheriff. And I disagree, because I believe it's one of the best departments in the state. However, we are not treating our employees properly. We must demand of our county council, when we're going to be doing training for whatever specific, let's take, for example, mental health issues. We need to have our officers trained in crisis management and how to handle people in mental crisis. There's funding within the budget for that, for mental health issues, $10 million. We need to make sure that we can access some of those monies. We need to take some of the monies when we know that our officers are going to be out training, that we need to be able to bring in trainers. Since if the issue is we can't send somebody out, let's bring trainers in. But again, it's going to cost money to bring those trainers in to train our people. And right now, that's not happening, because our county council and the budget that we have right now is not conducive to good training, because there's no money that is there to be had for it. We need to access different channels of money that are within the budget as we speak. Mental health issues, also for our homeless issues, we need to have officers trained in how to handle our homeless populations, what we can do to bring resources around them. All of this has to be brought up, but the first thing I want to bring to you is that we must have funding that is reallocated from different sources within our budget already. Dave said something about how 75% of the money goes to crime and justice. I think that that's including all of our services, courts, and all the rest of it. But it is shown throughout the years, even back to 2013, when Lucas was in, he made it very clear that we must have additional funding for our sheriff's office. That has not happened. Although there's been an increase, it's only been by way of taking care of inflation. We must have an increase that is commensurate with the times we have right now so that we can have more money to do training. That is what I'm thinking right now. And as the sheriff, I'm going to be asking our county council, and I believe we're going to have a good county council, that we need to have money for training. We need to bring in outside sources, and we need to think outside the box, which means bringing the trainers to our people.
Thank you.
Thank you. Colleen, did you have anything?
Yes, I'd like to ask each of you, please, to address what issues you see facing the Clark County Jail, and what do you think is the most prudent approach to dealing with those issues? And John, why don't we start with you, please?
All right, thank you. I've said this several times, is the county council, the community, and the sheriff's office all need to get together and look at this at a holistic approach of what type of services do we want our jail to provide. If it's just about housing bodies and you just want to build jail cells and it's about numbers, that's one approach. Is it about getting people help and having the behavioral health medical staff there and other services that get people once they're incarcerated, that help them so they don't come back, and we want to provide those services? That's a different type of facility. Whether you're going to revamp or add to or build a new jail, all those considerations and the costs have to be looked at. My druthers would be for us to start over and to build a brand new jail the way it's supposed to be done. I know it costs, but if there's political willpower, it can be done. And it can be presented to the people of Clark County of how it can be done. If people do not want that and the county council can't find the funds to do that, then we still need to modify our jail to add to it and to provide those services. Our current jail is, anybody has toured it, you can go for a couple-hour tour on there and see it is not adequate. It's not safe for inmates, it's not safe for the corrections officer, and it's run down, and it has to get fixed. We have to provide good services for people, and we have to make it safe for our employees as well. Getting everybody in the room and strategically plan it out is what has to get done, and look at the real costs. It can be done. There's a way to get these services and to provide enough beds for the population of Clark County. Once we all get in that room and we say we need to move this ball forward, it can get done, whether it's through a bond or different levies or whatever it takes. There is a way through it, but it has to get done. It cannot stay in the current state it is in. The liabilities are too high. The lawsuits will come to the county. Some have already hit, and the county can't afford not to take action. So as sheriff, the influence on that is, as a sheriff's office, we run the jail. The county council is the landlord. The community is going to express what they'd like to see for those facilities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. David, how about you? How would you address the jail?
Well, thank you. Several points to this. We've actually already spent over $800,000 studying this jail. I believe it was 2013, another time in 2018. We've had all the experts come together and speak about what the criminal justice system or the jail would look like for Clark County. It takes that next step of actually figuring out how you're going to fund it. Currently, we fund a lot of the operations on the backs of our inmates. So for example, when you have 800 inmates, guess what? You make more money than if you have 250 like COVID responded. Most people don't recognize or understand when COVID hit and all the restrictions from the health department happened, all the inmates were let out, not all. It went from 800 down to about 250. The state prison's about half of them. And so we have to figure out how to get those people back in that deserve to be back in, the criminals. And so to do that, we need to grow. Again, the staffing, we're going to have to make sure that we have the appropriate kind of staffing. Hiring laterals, you can get them online a lot quicker than you can a brand new employee. It's the difference of about 10 months versus about 12 to 14 months, right? So you focus on some of those laterals to plug the holes. This is a sinking ship a little bit. My druthers is expanding the existing footprint, right? There is some property that goes west of the existing facility where we could build upon the existing footprint. In 1984, when that jail was built, the footprint was wrong. It was that indirect facility that they built, which at the time was a model. That's not the model that's most effective today. Direct supervision is the best. The one at Washington County was the example of what our county wanted to build. I have experience working in there. So I want to make sure, because our inmates today are more complex than they were 20 or 30 years ago, or at least the laws are requiring us to manage them differently, right? So you have to separate certain ones. Right now, we've got cells that were made for one person have 3 in them. Cells that were for 6 have 12, and so on. So everybody is in there like sardines. It creates a safety and a hazard for our employees and the inmates that are inside of there waiting court or working out their sentence. So again, it's getting the plan in place. We have one. It's dusting it off. It's reevaluating, getting the current costs of what that would be. It's trying to find a Band-Aid initial approach to make sure we lessen our liabilities from inmates and our employees. And then we determine where exactly and how we're going to do it. Like I said, existing footprint, expanding it, building the new intake and all that section to it, and then remodeling as you go along closer to the courthouse is a vision that I would have for that. Again, you already have the property, you already have some of those things. Funding and getting this out to the public is super important. So we have a ballot measure on for August, right, for body cameras and jail, other funding. And there's, other than a few civilian employees, I'm sorry, not employees, but civilian folks out in the public, I haven't seen any of our administration out making sure that we're talking about this. We're not out to public groups and educating the public on why that's so important for the sheriff's office. Where I came from before, every 2 years we were out because we had a bond that paid about 1/3 of our operational costs. And so our mission was customer service, and it was educating the public so that when it came time to say, hey, here's a new levy or a new operational budget, and we need a little bit of an increase, this is what it's for. And you build that trust, because right now I don't believe the public trusts the government enough to say, yeah, we'll give you $500 million, you go forward and build whatever you want to do. It's got to be more of a full service, because that's the kind of inmates that we're taking in today. So thank you.
Right, thank you. Ray, what are your thoughts on the jail?
Yes, thank you. You know, this is probably one of the most important things that we can be talking about right now. Let me give you a little bit of background. Right now, officers, when we encounter felons and we arrest felons out there, most of our jail is not taking those felons. So we are leaving these criminals on your streets, which are now, everybody knows, is now becoming more and more dangerous as we speak. The process which you just heard right now is that from my friends here is that we want to just try to get more staff and we want to do more with, but they're not addressing the core issues. And the core issue is, number one, the toxicity within the department, and number two, we're not paying our people the proper amount. So there's 2 solutions. We definitely need a new jail. It's been studied. And if we're talking about for the more expensive, $425 million, there is a solution to that. First of all, I want to do the temporary solution first. The temporary solution that we have, that I'm proposing, and I have proposed in the past. And anyways, I believe what we need to do is this. We need to harden the hardened port facility. We need to utilize that facility. There's 100 beds there. If we were to take money like from the REAP fund, which we can use, and from, I believe one of the fund sources is 3083 and also 3056, we can use those funds to begin to start to harden that, to open that hardened facility. That's the one down there at the port. That would work out for 100 beds for right now. Of course, our goal will be to get 500 beds, but right now we're at around about 250 to 300 people are in there. I believe the last number I heard were 400 people in there. But we do need to increase our bed size. We want to get to about 750 beds. So we would also open that closed pod that is right now. We have a closed pod we've got that we could be open that pod again, and we issue a staffing, and I'll address that quickly here. And then the last one is to utilize the JDH. The JDH right now has 60 beds. We can use funds from the ARPA to help fund that situation. And I believe that is a very good way to do it. To open that closed pod, we're going to need to have the staffing. I'm going to propose that we bring in a private agency to help staff it and allow our people, meaning our deputies, our corrections deputies, to be supervising over those teams. Again, we can use some of the ARPA funds to pay for that, and that will take care of us right now as far as what we need. Because right now officers are not able to bring criminals in. The criminals are being left on your streets. The danger to you is real. And I won't hesitate about saying it. We absolutely have to do something. By doing the technique that I talked about with opening the closed pod and then opening the harm, we can have up to 750 beds. This is what we can do now on a temporary basis. But let's talk a little bit about what we need to do in the future. $425 million is a lot of money, but we shouldn't think that we have to do it alone. One of the things I've spoken with some of our private organizations like Peace Health, like Legacy, like some of those others, that they would be willing to assist in actually putting together a proposal to actually help become a public-private partnership where we could actually have mental health facilities. We could have addiction facilities at this location. All of these things we could work together with the private and have this relationship. I've spoken with them and they said that is such a good idea that they would be willing to work with us. And so far, because right now, as some of you know, we are about to fund, or people want to fund, a mental health facility up around 134th Street, and it's being opposed. The important thing that I would like us to do is work with the public, work with the people that we're going to be here in our lovely Clark County. If we work with the public, bring on Peace Health, bring on Legacy, talk to them about how they could be a part of a building project that we can set up. This is thinking outside the box. Continuing to think in the ways that have been brought up just right now will not get the problem solved. I like the temporary thing that I just gave you, and I do like the fact that we could have a public-private partnership that could actually start funding the full jail. And I'm very excited about that, and I believe we can do it. I know we can do it.
Thank you. David, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, just the comment about JDH and the private security. We have guilds here in our county, and there are requirements by counties and cities to have trained and certified, state-certified employees that oversee inmates or enforce the laws on the streets. You just can't bring in private security and post them in certain places and have other certified officers oversee them. Now, there is a method that's called SCORE. It's up in the Sound area. It's a private jail that is contracted by many of the counties that are up there in the South Sound area. That's a different model, but they are also sending those employees to CJTC. They have to have their certification, right? And so to be able to do that, it's just not it's not even really an option at this moment. And opening that extra pod requires more employees. So the more inmates you have to have a safe environment, you have to have more employees. We're already asking more of those employees internally working 16-hour shifts to be able to come in, and not every night are they able to have the minimum staffing that's required. They're supposed to have 11 posts filled every night, and sometimes they have 7, and sometimes they have 8. Now, for the last 3 or 4 months, they've been doing 2.25 hours of overtime, and that's a novel thing initially until you're exhausted, and then the money just doesn't really matter because you need that mental health and physical, being able to energize yourself. So again, we have to come up with some alternatives. The busiest time of the day in the jail is usually during daytime and through the afternoon, where you have jail services. It's a small city, right? And so then in food services, but at night you don't need as many, but you still need a skeleton crew to make sure the organization is safe. And so again, just to say, hey, we're going to open more pods because then we can put more criminals in there. Our jail work center, which is the facility that's down at the port, in that CFAC report in 2019 or 2018, whenever they finalized it, they had like 462 beds in the main jail. They had another 100 beds down in the JWC that they were able to fill. And then they were talking about adding another 100 beds down there. My understanding, they're starting to contract with a private entity to start bringing in some mental health and some other folks to be able to provide them some spaces. So again, it's going to take a strategic conversation with, like John or Mr. Horch had said, with all the right players. But to just say we're going to refix this JDH center, there's literally 4 to 6 juvenile offenders in that facility at any one time, with about 28 employees that are overseeing them. So we need to do something different. That's definitely an underutilized facility.
Okay, John, you had something to add real quick?
No, I'm not gonna. Can you hear me? Because
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, my screen went blank, but I can still hear you. No, I agree with Mr. Shook on a lot of those points. Is that hiring security? We can't even hire people at a higher rate to be corrections officers, and it's a 10-week academy, and they're highly trained. That's what you do. It starts with a staffing issue, but you do have to have those models in place. And the jail work center is one option for low-level offenders, but I don't think that the permit with the city included putting felons down there. In fact, I think that it restricts that. So that's something else that would have to talk with the city, and I highly doubt the city of Vancouver would approve that. So there's a lot of things, a lot of conversation need to happen, and that's where you strategically plan out with the experts and everybody once come January, because those conversations are not happening right now when we know that there's 3 new counselors coming in there, and those need to start on January 3rd, actually.
Colleen, did you have any follow-up on that?
No, thanks.
Okay, any other questions?
We're running out of time.
I know. So we'll move forward here. Give us your, and again, thanks to each of you for joining us. We'll move on. Give us your final pitch for why voters should support you, and feel free to mention any notable endorsements if you like. And we'll start with Ray.
Again, thank you so much for this discussion. I'm very, very pleased that we're having it. I believe that we're right now at the crux. We're at a place where the civil rights of our people, of the cities, of our county, are definitely being challenged. We must maintain a love for our Constitution and what we believe our Constitution says. We must not yield ourselves to laws or to legislation that violates that constitutional law. We can't do it. We simply must believe in our people. We must develop out-of-the-box thinking rather than the same thinking that we've just heard that actually will accomplish nothing for the next 6 to 7 months if we were to look at it like has been spoken about. We must think out of the box. We can utilize the models at SCORE. SCORE is a great idea, and there are people we can look up to. There's no reason not to, and there's no reason not to think about utilizing on a temporary basis a temporary group of people that we can bring contractors in. I believe that the people of Clark County want something, and what they want is safety, and they want hope, and right now they don't have it. We continue to talk about what we want to do, but we're not taking steps that are concrete, that are solid, that are going to actually do something. And that has not happened in the past. And now we're at the state where we're at a catastrophic level of staffing here at our sheriff's office. And our people are not, and our sheriff's office is losing people because of the lack of pay, because of the lack of staffing, because of the toxicity of the environment. We need to be ready to change that. I am going to come in with the spirit of hope. And that is, I'm going to come with programs that we've already done, like the NET program. The NET program that I've developed actually brings together a number of different groups. It brings together the mental health, it brings together addiction, housing, counseling. The NET program that I've developed actually solves the problem of homelessness. It actually solves the problem of emergencies. We've developed programs that has to do with domestic violence through our Domestic Violence Helps program that was developed, where we actually worked with the community, again, working with the hotels, working with private people to help develop a system where we can keep our people, our women that are being battered, safe. That is a program that we developed and works. Our community policing models that I've developed, Those are all working models where we can bring in our community, our deputy program, where we have a community deputy program. And that is critical for thinking about bringing our community in and making them safe. We have to establish that we are going to do what is right for the people of Clark County and not continue on this same path. I want to thank you all so much for taking the time to have us here. And again, I want to thank the people of Clark County for your incredible support that you've had for me, both now and I believe into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to John next.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Columbian board and the other candidates for being here today. Clark County is my home. Nobody cares more about the Clark County Sheriff's Office than I do because it is my family. And no one will outwork me. I have an incredible amount of support from inside law enforcement and outside law enforcement with the relationships I've built. I sit on several different boards outside of law enforcement, Lifeline Connections and other places because it's a community effort and my home is here and I don't like what I'm seeing in public safety right now, and that's why I'm running for sheriff. I get things done. My endorsements include a variety of lists, but you can go to my webpage. Sheriff Gary Lucas endorses me, retired Sheriff Gary Lucas. Dave Brown's Community County Sheriff endorses me, current. Brad Thurman, the Cowlitz County Sheriff. I have ex-city councilwoman Pachalata. I have a whole list of endorsements. And if you also go to my webpage, you'll see all the law enforcement support that I have because they know I get things done and they know I'm a proven leader. Yeah, we're hurting right now in the sheriff's office. I've said this. We're hurting in public safety around Clark County, a lot of issues. But there is a way forward, and we are making progress. It's not just waiting till January. I'm working on these things right now, moving the ball forward and doing everything I can. And we need somebody that is going to be, because it's going to be tough times still. Somebody who's courageous and somebody who's been at the top. I have the executive leadership. It takes when you go to the top and making those tough decisions, sometimes you're not well liked, and sometimes you have to make tough decisions. And you have to have somebody going in on day one that has already been tried and tested in those situations. And that's why I'm running for sheriff. I had a lot of people, like I said, come to me and encourage me to look at it closely. And I did. And I care about this community. And I care about our public safety. I am not about politics. I'm about public safety. I will not politicize the office of the sheriff at all. So I would appreciate your support. Go to my website to learn more about me at horchforsheriff.com. Email me or call me. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. And David.
Well, thank you. I've lived in this community for the last 10 years. Much of my leadership was at a former agency. But like I said, it didn't take long to see that we're broke. When I talk to many of the employees, it's not always about that money. It's about the lack of leadership that we're experiencing at this organization. And the courage that Mr. Horch talks about is absolutely required for us to make significant changes. But that courage and a new vision to look at. Now, again, I have 10 years of living in this community. I have 2 years of relationships that I've been building, but my focus is in creating those relationships that are more effective because, while the leadership at this organization has been around for 30 years, we're in our current status right now, and those relationships haven't helped at all, right? And so, again, it's going to require new relationships and different relationships to look at these problems differently. I have my former sheriff who actually started and created the Oregon jail standards. He was a big pusher in making sure that jail standards happened in the state of Oregon. He's actually a supporter of mine and endorsed me to become the next Clark County sheriff. He's going to be actually one of the individuals that comes up here to help me to fix and to push us in the right directions of the future. Washington State doesn't have a jail standard system. So as I look at our future, of course, those are relationships, but it's creating different relationships with our community. We have sections in our community that don't trust the police here in this region. So again, I hear a lot about existing relationships and how those are amazing, but we still have the existing public safety problems of our county. And it's time for somebody with a different vision, a different energy, and a different view on the problems to come in and have those conversations, to look at how we're going to fund, look at how we're going to lead this organization. Again, I'm a servant leader. I focus on other employees as my leadership style, but I have no problems in also coming up with my own priorities for this organization. which is changing the model from a law enforcement organization to a public service, public safety organization where you're problem solving. You're more caring about what's going on in our community than whether I'm going to arrest you or not. That's just a small component of what we're dealing with today. That livability, those neighbors that are fighting and having those issues need somebody to help support them also. And that's just not happening with our modern day public safety systems here in Clark County. We should be working together. Our funding isn't unlimited, it's very limited. And my experience here is that even in my own agency, that the communication is siloed, the work effort is siloed, and that we're not all working in the same direction to solve livability issues. There's a county homeless, there's a city homeless, there's a police agency working on different things. We are a county sheriff's office, and we need to focus on a bigger umbrella picture of public safety for our community, working together with all those other law enforcement officials. So again, Clackamas County Under Sheriff endorsement, the former HR director of Clark County, who's actually worked with a different opponent than I here, actually supporting me and has endorsed me. You know, so when you look at some of the different things, I have no problems with building relationships in this community. But I think it's time to create different relationships and lead the effort in how we want to do public safety. So I appreciate your time. My name is Dave Shook, Shook for Sheriff. You can look me up on social media or on the website, and you're welcome to give me a call. We can have conversations too. I really appreciate the editorial board for inviting all of us, and for the other two gentlemen who are running for this very esteemed position. I appreciate all of us.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks to each of you for joining us.